Camping alone has always been one of my favorite things to do. I know it sounds strange to some people, no friends, no cell service, no internet, just me in the woods. But for me, it's a kind of therapy, a reset button. I live a pretty fast life when I'm back home. Work, traffic, noise, screens everywhere. Sometimes I just need to disconnect and sit still for a while. This trip was supposed to be exactly that. I had 4 days off work, and I wanted to make the most of it. I planned everything carefully, picked a spot up in the high desert near the mountains, an area I'd camped near before, but never quite this deep. It wasn't a national park, so there weren't campsites with picnic tables or bathrooms or rules about where to park your truck. It was BLM land, open and wild and free, perfect for someone who didn't want to be bothered. I packed up my truck with my usual gear, tent, sleeping pad, cooler full of food, stove, and my .357 revolver. I'm not a paranoid guy, but I believe in being prepared. I don't go out into the wilderness without some kind of protection, especially when I'm alone. You never know what kind of animal you might run into, or worse, what kind of person. I drove about 3.5 hours to the site. The last stretch was nothing but dusty fire roads and rough gravel. No cell service for at least an hour before I even got there. I pulled off onto a flat clearing, backed the truck in so it was facing out, and started setting up camp. The spot was beautiful. I was surrounded by tall junipers and scattered pine, with views of red hills and rocky outcrops in the distance. You could hear nothing but the wind and the occasional bird call.
No engines, no voices.
Nothing else, just me and the land. I spent the rest of the day setting up, hiking a bit, and enjoying the quiet. That first night was peaceful, cold, but not too cold. I built a fire, heated up a can of chili, and sat under the stars with my jacket zipped up to my chin. Slept like a rock. The next morning, I woke up with the sun, had some instant coffee, stretched, and decided to go on a short hike before breakfast. I took my time, wandered maybe a mile or two from camp, and came back just as my stomach started growling. I cooked up some eggs and sausage in my little pan and sat on a rock to eat. Afterward, I packed everything back into the truck. Trash, food, anything that might attract animals. I've always been careful about that. Around mid-morning, I felt the urge. The coffee and greasy breakfast had kicked in, and my stomach started making it clear it was time to go. Now, when you're camping off-grid like that, there's no bathroom to run to. You find a spot, dig a hole, and take care of business. I grabbed a small shovel, a roll of toilet paper, my sidearm, just in case, and walked a little ways into the trees. I picked a spot maybe 70 or 80 yards from my tent. Somewhere private, out of sight, behind a boulder and a dead tree. The ground was dry but soft enough to dig a hole. I made it deep, maybe 6 inches or so, and dropped my pants, squatted down, elbows on knees, breathing slow, trying to relax. And then I felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, just a shift in the air, like something had changed. I couldn't explain it. The wind died, the birds stopped, my spine tingled. I looked up, and that's when I saw it. Across the clearing, just past a fallen log and a patch of brush, maybe 100 feet away, stood a mountain lion. It wasn't moving, just standing there, stock still, staring right at me. Eyes locked, ears up, tail low, not crouching, not charging, just watching. Now I've seen bobcats before, even black bears once or twice, but I had never seen a mountain lion in the wild until that moment. And there's something about it that no picture or documentary can prepare you for. It wasn't just big, it was perfect. Pure muscle, smooth and quiet and balanced like a shadow, like a ghost made of fur and bone. And it was looking straight into my soul. I froze. My brain started to scream, but my body couldn't move. I was mid-squat, pants down around my ankles, vulnerable in the worst possible way. I wasn't sure if it had just wandered into view or if it had been watching me the whole time. I glanced down at my revolver. It was lying on the ground beside me, where I had set it without thinking. Closed but not in my hands. Every second stretched. The cat didn't move. Neither did I. My heart was hammering in my chest. I felt like my pulse alone would give me away. I knew I wasn't supposed to run. I knew sudden movement could trigger it. I slowly, as slow as I've ever moved in my life, reached out and wrapped my fingers around the grip of my revolver. I didn't raise it, just held it. That helped. I looked back at the cat, still there, still watching. I could feel sweat running down my face. My body finally did what it was there to do, but not in the normal way. The fear, the pressure, the sheer adrenaline in my system made it fast. Too fast. My stomach twisted and emptied itself like it knew it was now or never. When I was finally done, I didn't bother wiping. I didn't move to cover the hole. I just stood up, pulled my pants up as fast and as quiet as I could, revolver still in hand, eyes never leaving the cat. Still didn't move. I slowly began backing away, one step at a time. Every stick I stepped on felt like thunder. I didn't turn around. I didn't look away. My hand shook as I pointed the revolver in its direction. Not to shoot, but to remind myself I wasn't helpless. Not entirely. I made it back to the camp slowly. Felt like miles. The cat didn't follow. I checked every few seconds. Nothing. It had stayed still. Maybe it got bored. Maybe it just wanted to scare me. Maybe it was never going to attack. Or maybe it was trying to figure out if I was worth the effort. When I finally got back to camp, I climbed into the bed of the truck and sat there, gun still in hand, scanning the trees. I didn't see it again. Not that day, not the next. But I never stopped looking. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept waking up at every sound, thinking it might be back. I kept the gun right next to me, safety off, hammer half-cocked. Every gust of wind through the trees made me flinch. The next morning, I packed up. I had planned to stay another 2 nights, but my gut told me it was time to go. Maybe that cat was long gone. Maybe it never had any interest in me. But I wasn't going to test my luck. I left nothing behind, buried the waste properly, loaded everything back into the truck, and drove out before the sun got too high. The roads were just as rough as before, but I didn't care. I was just happy to be moving, to be behind a wheel, not crouched in the dirt. Back home, I told a few close friends what happened. Most laughed. Some told me I was lucky. A couple said I should have tried to take a picture. But none of them really understood what it felt like. What it means to be completely exposed in the face of something that could end your life before you even had time to scream. It wasn't just the danger. It was the timing, the vulnerability. I wasn't hiking or climbing or out on the trail. I was taking a shit. That's when it chose to show up. Or maybe that's when I finally saw it. That trip changed how I camp. I still go out, still love the quiet, but I don't go alone as often. And when I do, I stay more alert. I dig my bathroom spots closer to camp. I carry the gun differently. I keep my head on a swivel even when I'm squatting. People don't realize how fast things can change out there. One moment you're enjoying the morning, breathing the fresh air, and the next you're staring into the eyes of a predator. A real one, not a metaphor, not a dream. A living, breathing killer that doesn't care about you, doesn't hate you, just sees you. That mountain lion let me go. I don't know why. Maybe it sensed I wasn't a threat. Maybe it was full. Or maybe it was just curious. But it let me walk away. I've never forgotten those eyes. Yellow, sharp, alive. I see them sometimes when I close mine. And I'll never again take a crap in the woods without my gun in hand. Because you never know what's watching.
I love solo camping.
Not because I don't like people, but because I like the silence that comes when nobody's around to fill it. Out in the woods, the quiet has a different texture. There's wind, birds, branches moving, maybe a creek, but no cars, no voices, no screens buzzing. Just nature doing its thing, completely uninterested in you. I need that sometimes. This trip wasn't anything special. Just a 3-day weekend I had to myself in early October. The weather had cooled enough that most casual campers had packed it in for the year, but it wasn't cold enough to freeze your toes at night. Just perfect. Chilly mornings, warm afternoons, golden light slicing through thinning leaves. I drove out to a place I'd been to once before, near the base of the Sawtooth Range, far enough from the main trails that you had to work to get there. Not quite backpacking-only terrain, but not a place where you'd expect to see RVs or loud weekenders either. There's a dirt road that snakes through the woods and ends in a small loop, big enough to park a truck and maybe turn around if you really know what you're doing. That's where I parked. I got in just after noon, took my time unloading gear. Tent, sleeping bag, food box, fold-out chair, fire supplies, a small axe. I brought my .45 in its holster, a habit I never break when camping solo. I don't expect trouble, but I'm not the kind of guy who plays odds when it comes to wild animals or wild people. I hiked in maybe half a mile from where I parked, looking for a patch of flat ground close to a creek. Took me about 30 minutes to find the right spot. Cleared of rocks, shaded, near water but not so close that condensation would soak the tent overnight. I pitched the tent, laid out the pad and sleeping bag, stashed food in a bear-proof canister and wedged it in a crack under some heavy rocks. The air smelled sharp and dry, full of pine sap and dust. That first afternoon passed easily. I didn't hike too far, just explored a little, filtered water, boiled some rice and beans for dinner. As the light faded, I sat by the fire and stared into the flames, feeling my thoughts slow down for the first time in weeks. The sounds of the forest rolled around me. Owls, small twigs snapping from some animal passing through the brush, the breeze pushing through tree limbs overhead. That's the kind of quiet I came for. I slept well that night, only waking once to pee, and then again when a branch snapped near the tent sometime around 3 a.m. I froze when I heard it, my mind quickly flipping through mental flashcards. Deer, bear, raccoon, human. I stayed still and listened. Whatever it was passed through, not stopping, not lingering, and didn't come back. I eased my breathing, then slept again until sunrise. The second day started early. A pink-orange sunrise lit the trees on fire with color, and my breath fogged the air as I sipped hot instant coffee by the creek. I decided to hike up the ridgeline that overlooked the valley, a trail I hadn't explored before. I packed a small day pack, water, snacks, knife, extra socks, compass, sidearm, and headed uphill. The hike was harder than I expected. The incline got steep fast, and loose rocks made it tricky in spots. But the views were worth it. Around noon, I stopped on a ledge about 200 feet above the valley floor and ate a pack of jerky and a granola bar, drinking in the silence with every bite. I sat there a long time, sun warming my back, legs dangling over the edge. That's when I saw movement. At first, I thought it was a large dog or maybe a deer coming through the trees below. But the way it moved, low to the ground, smooth, muscles tight and fluid, it wasn't a deer. I squinted and watched as a mountain lion stepped out of the brush. It walked carefully, with that eerie feline grace, right into a small clearing maybe 150 feet downslope from where I was sitting. I immediately felt my heart thud against my ribs. My first instinct was to freeze, and I did. I didn't move a muscle. My hand slowly reached for the grip of my holstered sidearm, not drawing it, just holding it for reassurance. The cat didn't notice me. It was focused on something else or just passing through. Then the strangest thing happened. The mountain lion stopped, sniffed around a bit, turned in a slow circle, then squatted, right there in the middle of the clearing. I was watching a full-grown mountain lion take a dump in the woods. It would have been funny, probably hilarious under different circumstances, but my body didn't get the memo. I was still frozen in place, every sense hyper-alert, adrenaline dripping through my chest like cold syrup. Still, I couldn't look away. The thing made a face. You wouldn't think a wild predator had expressions like that, but it did. Eyes half closed, upper lip pulled back slightly. It looked exactly like those stupid cat reaction images online, the ones people use for memes. But here it was real and deadly and squatting in the woods. When it finished, the mountain lion stood up, looked around, and walked off into the brush without urgency. Gone like it had never been there. No sound, no trace, just vanished into the trees. I sat there for maybe 10 more minutes, unmoving, not because I was still scared, but because I didn't trust myself not to laugh out loud and call it back. Eventually, I stood, brushed off my pants, and slowly made my way back down to camp. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept scanning the trees around the firelight, listening for soft paws or snapping twigs. I knew mountain lions didn't usually attack humans. Statistically, it was rare, but the randomness of seeing it so casually, so close to where I was camping, unsettled me. Still, I stayed. I had one more night, and I figured if it had wanted to mess with me, it would have done it already. But I made sure to keep the fire going bright and long. I slept with my revolver under my pillow, and every hour or so I woke up and checked outside through the tent mesh. Nothing. The next morning, I broke camp quickly. The funny part was over. What was left was an edge I couldn't shake. A sense that something wild and untouchable had brushed close to my world without caring I was there. I didn't feel threatened anymore. I felt small, like an intruder. As I hiked back to my truck with my pack strapped tight, I passed the general area where I'd seen the cat. I didn't look for the exact clearing. I didn't want to find it. Something about walking through the place where a mountain lion had taken a dump just didn't sit right with me. I kept moving. When I got back to the truck, I opened the door, tossed in my pack, and just stood there for a while, breathing. I looked around at the trees one more time. Everything was calm, peaceful even, but something had shifted in me. It wasn't fear. It was the understanding that I don't belong out there the way those animals do. I visit, I camp, hike, sit under the stars, but I'm not part of it. Not really. That mountain lion? It was home, could appear and disappear at will. I was just passing through. On the drive home, the image kept coming back. The cat's face, twisted in that weird expression. And I laughed out loud for real that time, all alone in the cab of my truck. I laughed hard. That had to be one of the weirdest moments of my life. Scary, surreal, and somehow stupid all at once. Back home, I told a few close friends about it. Nobody believed me at first. Then I showed them the general area on a map, described the sequence of events, and one guy said, "You saw a mountain lion poop." That's it. Like it wasn't a big deal. But here's the thing. It was a big deal. Not because of what it did, but because of what it reminded me. Nature doesn't care about you. It doesn't fear you, but it doesn't respect you either. It just is. That cat wasn't showing off, or threatening me, or even doing anything special. It was just living its life, completely oblivious to how ridiculous the situation felt to me. And I was there for it, completely out of place, laughing inside, heart pounding, trying to decide whether to laugh or run. Since that trip, I've still gone camping, still go solo sometimes, but I don't wander quite as far from camp without scanning the tree line first. I keep my weapon closer, and when I find a clearing that looks quiet and undisturbed, I look for tracks now. Because maybe, just maybe, that clearing isn't empty. Maybe something out there used it before me, and maybe it's watching from the brush, wondering what I'm doing in its toilet. I've always enjoyed getting away for a few days with just a tent, a cooler, and some peace. No emails, no phone calls, just trees, fresh air, and time to reset. That's the only reason I even went to that campground in the first place. I usually preferred dispersed camping, off-trail, off-grid, away from the crowds. But this time, I didn't have enough time to plan a backcountry trip. I only had 3 days off work, and I needed something simple. So I picked a place I'd never been before. It was called Pine Loop Campground, out in a national forest that was a few hours' drive from where I lived. I picked it because it had decent reviews, looked quiet, and had access to some trails that weren't too popular. I booked a site online, packed my gear, and drove out early on a Friday morning. The place was mostly empty when I pulled in around noon. Only a couple of other campsites had cars parked near them, and I liked that. The sites were spaced out well, with some trees between them and decent cover. I backed into my assigned spot, set up my tent, unrolled my sleeping bag, and got everything in order for the night. After a late lunch of jerky and crackers, I went for a walk. There was a small trailhead behind the loop that led up to a ridge with views of the forest below. It wasn't a hard hike, about 2 miles round trip, but it was steep in spots and gave me just enough of a workout to feel like I earned my rest when I got back. When I returned, I noticed something a little strange. The bathrooms were located near the entrance of the loop, a short walk from my site. They were the typical type, concrete block, one for men and one for women, single stalls with locking metal doors. They didn't smell great, but they weren't disgusting. I'd used them earlier in the day and had no issue. But now, walking past them on my way back from the trail, I noticed the men's bathroom door was slightly open. That wasn't unusual in itself, but there was something on the ground inside. Something dark, slouched in the corner near the back wall. I paused. I wasn't trying to snoop, but it caught my eye. I stepped a little closer and peeked in through the open door. What I saw was a backpack. Not old or dirty. It looked new, gray with black straps like something a college student might use. It was sitting in the corner of the stall, leaning against the wall like someone had set it down and forgotten it. That in itself was weird. Who forgets a backpack in a public bathroom in the middle of the woods? But that wasn't what made my stomach turn. What made my skin crawl was what was spilling out of it. The front zipper was open, and poking out from the top was a rainbow-colored pile of something. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I recognized the colors. Skittles. The backpack was full of Skittles. Not a few loose candies, but thousands of them. They were overflowing, spilling onto the concrete floor in a scattered heap. Reds, purples, yellows, oranges. Bright, artificial color in a place that should have had none. It looked like someone had dumped bags and bags of the stuff into that pack. So many that the seams were straining. There were no wrappers, no trash, just pure candy packed tight like someone had deliberately filled it to the brim and then left it there. No signs of mice or bugs. No water damage. It looked fresh, like it had been dropped there that morning. I stared at it for a long time. The whole thing felt off. Why would someone do that? Why haul a heavy backpack full of candy into the middle of the woods, take it into a bathroom, unzip it, and leave it there? It wasn't just strange. It was unsettling. I didn't touch it. I just backed away and returned to my sight. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was some dumb joke, or someone had planned a prank and bailed. But the longer I thought about it, the less sense it made. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it gnawed at me. That night, I made a fire, cooked a hot dog, and sat by the flames for hours. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustle in the bushes or the hoot of an owl. I didn't see anyone else. No other campers walked by. No headlights came down the road. It felt like I had the whole place to myself. I slept uneasily. My mind kept going back to the backpack, to the Skittles, to the way it looked just sitting there like someone had placed it carefully, like it meant something. The next morning, I woke up early. I walked back toward the bathroom to see if it was still there. It was. Same position, same open zipper, same candy spilling out. Still no sign of wrappers or bugs. Still no smell. Just that same unnatural pile of colors in the corner of a concrete stall. I noticed something else this time. A set of footprints in the dirt just outside the door. They were faint but visible. Hiking boots, medium size. One set going in, none coming out. That got under my skin. I went back to my site, ate a quick breakfast, and packed a day bag for a longer hike. I told myself I'd clear my head, try to enjoy the day, forget about the weirdness. I took a trail that led deeper into the forest, out past the ridge I'd visited the day before. The hike was beautiful, quiet, green, filled with the smell of pine and the crunch of dry needles underfoot. I saw no one, not a single person for miles. It helped me calm down. I got back late in the afternoon, tired but a little more centered, until I saw the bathroom again. This time, the door was closed. That struck me right away. It had been ajar both times I'd seen it before. Now it was fully shut. I stopped. I just stood there and watched for a while. No sound, no movement, but I couldn't stop thinking about those footprints. Eventually, I forced myself to walk past. I didn't stop or look in. I didn't want to know if the backpack was still there. I didn't want to see if anything had changed. That night was worse than the first. Every crack of a branch, every gust of wind through the trees made me sit up and listen. I kept thinking about the weight of the backpack, about how heavy it must have been to carry that much candy, about who would do that and why. What kind of person thinks like that? Who fills a bag with candy and leaves it somewhere it doesn't belong? I slept in short bursts, waking up drenched in sweat, ears straining for sounds I couldn't name. The next morning, I decided I'd had enough. I wasn't waiting for the third night. I packed up everything, tent, sleeping bag, stove, the works, and loaded it into the car. Before I left, I had to check. I didn't want to, but I had to know. I walked back to the bathroom. The door was open again. I stepped up to the entrance. The air smelled stale, no different than usual. I peeked inside. The backpack was gone. Nothing else had changed. The corner was empty. No candy on the floor.
No mes.
Just bare concrete, as if it had never been there. My chest tightened. I turned and walked straight back to my car. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I drove the whole way home with the windows cracked, feeling like something was watching me from the trees the entire time. Back home, I couldn't let it go. I looked up Pine Loop Campground online. I searched forums, trip reports, local news. Nothing. No missing persons. No strange reports. No notes about weird findings in the bathrooms. Just standard camping stuff. Reviews about how quiet it was, how nice the trails were. But I know what I saw. I know how it made me feel. The weight of it. The strangeness. The sense that something wasn't right. A backpack full of Skittles doesn't mean anything on its own. But in that place, in that context, it was wrong. It didn't belong. And someone had put it there on purpose. I've camped plenty since then, but I avoid places with too few people now. I still go out alone sometimes, but I stick to trails where I know others pass through. Places where weird things can't happen unnoticed. Places where silence doesn't feel like it's pressing in on you. Somewhere out there, someone filled that backpack with candy, carried it into the woods, and left it behind like a message, or a lure, or a trap. I don't know which. I don't think I ever will, but I won't forget it. I know how it felt to see that burst of color on a cold, hard floor in the middle of nowhere. I know the way my gut twisted when I saw the prints going in and none coming out. I know how heavy the air felt when the backpack vanished like it had never existed. And I know I was right to leave when I did. I was lucky. Some people don't get a warning. Some people follow the trail of candy to its end. And sometimes the end is just silence. I've done a lot of solo camping trips over the years, and I've gotten used to being deep in the woods, far from other people. I enjoy the silence, the feeling of being completely cut off. When I go out, I try to stay away from marked trails and campsites. I'm not a survivalist or anything like that. I just like peace and being out where things feel untouched. So I've developed a habit of looking at old topo maps and piecing together my own routes. That's how I ended up planning a trip into one of the less visited areas of Colorado's San Juan Mountains. I had a week off work early September. Weather was still good, dry, cool at night, warm during the day. Not many bugs. Leaves hadn't changed yet. I wanted something high up, somewhere with lakes, maybe some light scrambling. I found a narrow valley, a few miles off from the more popular basins. The map showed steep ridges on either side, a slow river running through it, and some old mining roads leading toward the far end. The last known trails ended about 6 miles before the valley proper. That was perfect. I packed for 5 days. Tent, sleeping bag, freeze-dried food, stove, water filter, layers, bear spray, GPS, paper map, and everything else I knew I'd need. I planned a loop that would take me through the valley, then up and over one of the passes to circle back around. It wasn't supposed to be technical, just remote and wild. The first day was uneventful. I hiked in, made good time, set up camp near a river bend, and watched the sunset through the trees. I saw deer, heard the occasional squirrel, nothing unusual. The air was clean and cool. The stars came out hard and bright after the sun dipped behind the ridgeline. On the second day, I followed an old path toward the mouth of the valley. It had once been a wagon track, wide, cut into the slope, but most of it had collapsed or filled in over the years. At one point, I had to climb over a downed pine and skirt a mudslide where the hillside had peeled away. After a couple of hours, I started seeing signs of the old mining activity. Broken boards, rusted nails, an old pipe half sunk in the stream. I knew I was getting close to where people used to live up here. Around noon, I crested a rise and saw the valley open up in front of me. It was narrow, maybe a quarter-mile wide, stretching for another couple of miles until it curled into a bowl surrounded by rock. Pines lined the slopes. A thin stream cut through the middle, and a dirt path still wound along the east side. I followed it. Maybe half an hour later, I saw the cabin. It was just off the path, near a bend in the stream, tucked among a few trees, not far from a stand of bare rock. It looked old gray wood, sloped roof, boards warped from years of snow and sun. The door was shut, windows empty, no glass left. I was surprised to see it intact. Most of the old cabins I'd come across on past hikes had been flattened or burned or eaten up by the weather. What really got my attention, though, was the ground around it. At first, I didn't notice. I was still looking at the cabin when I stepped off the path and into the clearing. The crunch under my boots felt different, drier. When I looked down, I saw nothing but gray grass and dry dirt. No green, no shoots, no moss or ferns. Just dead grass and bare patches of earth. It was strange. I walked around slowly. The circle was obvious once you were in it. Maybe 30 feet across. Not perfectly round, but close. And everything inside that shape was dead. The grass, the bushes, even the bark on the trees near the edge looked brittle and gray. I saw a small bird on the ground near a tree root, curled, dried out, not rotting. It looked like it had fallen from the branch above and just never decomposed. There was no smell.
No rot.
Just this strange stillness, like nothing had touched the place in years.
No bugs. No birdsong.
Not even wind. The air was still and dry. I felt something tighten in my chest. I didn't step closer to the cabin. I stayed near the outer edge of the circle and looked in. The cabin was maybe 15 feet away. The door was closed, slightly tilted on its frame. The roof had sagged in one corner. There was no sign of fire or storm damage. Just time. I didn't know what to think. I've seen abandoned places before, but never like this. The stillness, the dead ground, the absence of any living sound. It felt wrong. Not scary in a horror movie way, just deeply wrong. I stood there for a few minutes trying to figure out what could cause something like that. I thought maybe chemicals, maybe something left behind from mining, but it had been decades. And it was so specific, so clearly outlined. I didn't go inside. I didn't even cross the clearing. I just stood there, watching the light hit the side of the building and realizing I wanted to leave. I turned around and walked back the way I came. I kept looking over my shoulder, even though I didn't hear anything. The hairs on my arms were standing up. I didn't stop until I was back on the main trail, maybe half a mile down. That night, I made camp farther back, closer to where I had stayed the night before. I didn't want to be near that valley, even though it meant losing time on my loop. I cooked dinner in silence, sitting with my back to a tree. I didn't hear any animals that night. No wind either, just cold stillness, like something had followed me out. I thought about it for hours. What could kill everything in such a clean pattern? I ruled out obvious things, radiation, pesticides, a buried tank of gas. None of that made sense for a place that remote. There were no roads, no tire tracks, nothing to suggest someone had been there in years. And everything was dead, not just the plants. Bugs, birds, even the soil was cracked and dry like it hadn't felt moisture in ages. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, listening, waiting. The silence had weight to it. When the sun finally came up, I packed quickly. I decided not to finish the loop. I didn't want to cross that high pass anymore. I took the same trail back the way I came, fast and focused. I was back at my car by the afternoon of the fourth day. Drove into town, checked into a cheap motel, and sat in the shower for half an hour. I tried to push the cabin out of my head. Tried to focus on normal things, the hum of traffic, the buzz of electricity, the weight of a soft bed. But I couldn't forget it. Back home, I looked up the area. Found old mining records. There had been a small operation there in the early 1900s. Silver and zinc mostly. A few cabins, a storehouse, maybe a dozen men at one point. It closed down sometime before World War I. No major accidents recorded.
No fires.
Nothing strange on paper. I found satellite images of the valley. Nothing detailed, but if you looked closely, you could see a small shape near the stream, a square structure, and faint grayness around it. Even from above, the dead zone showed up. I never reported it. Who would I report it to? The Forest Service wouldn't send someone out unless there was a fire. Scientists would want samples, but I wasn't about to lead anyone back there. I didn't want to go back. Whatever it was, it had been there for years, maybe decades, maybe longer. Now, years later, I still camp. I still hike, but I avoid that whole region. I stick to trails I know, and I don't go near anything that feels wrong. If I see a place where things stop growing, where life goes silent, I turn around and leave. There's no need for ghosts or monsters when the land itself tells you something's not right. That valley was quiet, still, and lifeless in a way that felt final. That cabin was just a shell, standing in the middle of it all, like a marker left behind for something that once went wrong and never healed. I don't know what happened there. I probably never will. But I know what I saw. I know how it felt. And that's enough for me. I had been planning a desert camping trip for a while. It was early spring, and the idea of wide, dry open land with cool nights and empty silence had been calling to me. I'd done mountain hikes, forest trails, and riverbank camps, but I hadn't spent real time in the desert, just crossed through it on road trips. This time, I wanted to park the car, hike out on foot, and stay overnight in the open, just me and the sand and the wind. The area I picked was remote. I found it through a dusty old blog about forgotten camping spots. It was part of a high desert region in the southwest. Not a national park, just BLM land, public and unregulated. You had to bring everything you needed because nothing was provided. No bathrooms, no water spigots, no signs. It was the kind of place where you could go a whole weekend without seeing another human. Exactly what I was looking for. I packed carefully. I brought 6 liters of water, dehydrated food for 3 days, a small gas burner, a sleeping pad, a one-man tent, a basic first aid kit, satellite GPS, and a detailed paper map. I wore light boots, canvas pants, and a long-sleeve shirt to keep the sun off me. I also packed a hat, sunglasses, sunblock, a headlamp, and 2 knives. I made sure everything was double-checked before I left. I drove out early on a Friday morning and got to the trailhead by noon. The gravel road that brought me there was barely a road at all. My car kicked up a huge cloud of dust that hung in the air even after I parked and stepped out. I locked the car, threw on my pack, and started walking. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. It wasn't like the quiet you get in the forest, with birds chirping and wind in the trees. This was dead quiet, the kind of quiet that made your ears ring. Just the crunch of my boots on hard-packed dirt and the occasional gust of hot wind. The landscape was dry and brown, dotted with jagged rocks and little clumps of cactus. I followed a faint trail for about 5 miles, then veered off toward a group of low, flat-topped hills I'd seen on the map. I wanted to set up camp near the base of one, just where a dry creek bed twisted out like a scar. By late afternoon, I reached it. The sun was already dropping, casting long shadows across the rock. I found a small rise overlooking the creek bed and set up my tent there. The ground was mostly firm sand with patches of gravel and dry grass. I cleared an area for my tent, laid down my mat, and unrolled the sleeping bag inside. I was sweating, covered in dust, and my legs were tired, but I felt good. I boiled water on my little burner and made a pouch of freeze-dried chili. I sat on a flat rock, eating slowly, watching the horizon glow orange, then pink, then darken into deep purple. The temperature dropped fast, and I pulled on a hoodie. That night, I sat outside for a long time, watching stars appear like pinholes in black fabric. I had never seen so many at once. The desert sky was massive, stretching above me without end. Eventually, I crawled into my tent and zipped it shut. The night was cold but calm. I slept light but steady. The next morning, I woke up with the sun. I had coffee and oatmeal, then went exploring around the area, taking photos, checking the old creek bed for signs of animals. I found small tracks, maybe fox, maybe rodent, but nothing big. The sand was dry and cracked in places, curled like paper. I stayed close to camp most of the day, resting, reading a book I brought, and trying not to move too much in the heat. In the late afternoon, I decided to do one more loop before dinner. I walked about half a mile along the base of the hill, following the edge of a boulder field. I liked how the shadows stretched and changed as the sun sank again. I was walking carefully, stepping between rocks. When it happened, I felt a sudden twitch under my foot, like a tiny spring snapping, and then something sharp brushed my ankle. I jumped back instinctively. My boot had landed on something alive, and it had tried to react. When I looked down, I saw it, a scorpion, pale beige, almost the same color as the dust, maybe 3 inches long, flat body, claws splayed. It wasn't moving much, but it wasn't dead either. Its tail was bent sideways in a weird angle. The stinger was there, but not lifted up the way I'd seen in videos. I stared at it for a while, heart pounding, half crouched and sweating cold. I realized I must have stepped directly on the tail, pinning it down. Maybe I had crushed something in the joint. That thing could have stung me. I was wearing boots, but if I'd stepped wrong, or if it had gotten my ankle above the top of the boot, it could have been bad. Real bad. I backed away slowly, watching it. Still didn't move much. I wasn't sure if it was dying or just stunned. But either way, I didn't go closer. I made my way back to camp with my heart thudding the whole time. My ankle didn't hurt, which was good, but I couldn't stop thinking about how close that had been. I sat down and pulled off my boot and sock to check. Nothing, just a little scratch from the brush. Still, I cleaned it and wrapped it loosely just in case. The thought of venom crawling up my leg wouldn't leave my mind. I ate dinner but didn't enjoy it. Every shadow outside the firelight felt like it was hiding something. I kept thinking about how many more scorpions might be out there, under rocks, under my tent, inside my boots. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the headlamp on low and stared at the roof of the tent. Every small sound outside, wind in the grass, pebbles shifting, made my muscles tense. I stayed zipped up, trying to control my breathing. I didn't fall asleep until well after midnight. When I woke up again, it was still dark. I had heard something. Not an animal exactly, more like a thump, like something heavy had dropped nearby. I didn't move. I just lay still, listening. Another thump, closer. Not soft like a squirrel or bird. This was bigger. I slowly unzipped the tent door an inch and peeked out. The desert was dim in the moonlight, but I could make out a shape. A figure of some kind, crouched near where I had left my pack. My stomach dropped. I thought it might be a coyote or a bobcat, but it wasn't moving like one. Then it stood up. It was a person. I froze. The figure was thin, average height, wearing a hooded jacket or coat. They didn't have a flashlight, just moved slowly and silently, touching things near my stuff. I stayed dead quiet. My heart was hammering in my chest, so loud I thought they might hear it. I didn't know if I should yell, or try to sneak out, or just wait. My knife was in my boot by the flap of the tent. No way to get to it without unzipping more. The figure moved toward the tent. I held my breath, but then, just as suddenly, they turned and walked away, back toward the hill. No sound, no light, just vanished into the dark. I lay there for what felt like an hour before I dared to move. When the sun finally started to rise, I unzipped the tent fully and stepped out. My legs were shaky. I checked my pack. Nothing missing. Nothing moved. I checked for footprints, faint impressions in the dirt, heading toward the rocks. I didn't see where they led. I packed everything in record time. I didn't eat. I didn't even drink. I just threw everything into the pack, slung it over my shoulder, and started walking. I didn't take the scenic way back. I didn't stop to take photos. I didn't look at the hills. I kept my eyes on the trail and my ears sharp. I walked fast, even though my legs felt like stone. Took me just over 2 hours to get back to the car. When I saw it, I almost cried. I unlocked it, tossed my gear in the back, and drove away, tires spitting gravel. I didn't stop until I hit the nearest town. Small place with a gas station and a diner. I pulled into the lot, sat behind the wheel for 5 minutes just to breathe, then went inside. I ordered eggs and toast and sat near the window, looking out at the horizon. I thought about everything that had happened, how close the scorpion came to nailing me, how close that person came to my tent. I thought about how I had wanted silence and isolation, but I hadn't been ready for what came with it. The desert didn't care that I was careful. It didn't care that I planned things out. It gave me something raw, something I'll never forget. When I got home, I unpacked slowly. I washed everything twice. I checked every inch of my pack and my boots. I kept thinking about that scorpion, how its tail was bent at a weird angle, how it had twitched under my foot. It had probably tried to sting, but couldn't. I got lucky, real lucky. Now I still go camping. I still go out into wild places, but I've learned to respect the land more than I ever did before. I double-check where I step. I never leave boots outside the tent, and I always carry my knife where I can reach it in the dark. And I never forget that even in the quietest places, you're never really alone. I used to go camping with a group of friends every fall. Same weekend each year, same patch of forest. It was a tradition. Some of the guys brought their kids. A few of them stayed close to the site and drank beer all day. Others, like me, liked to hike off a little further and clear our heads. But in 2021, none of the guys could make it. Schedules didn't line up, someone's kid got sick, someone else had a family trip. I decided to go solo. I'd been to the area enough times that I felt comfortable doing it alone. It wasn't far from where I lived, and I wasn't planning anything extreme. Just a couple nights in the woods, some peace and quiet before the colder months rolled in. The place we always went was part of a larger forest system in southern Kentucky. Lots of old trails, faded fire roads, and places where people used to live before the park expanded and bought out the land. Most of it wasn't marked. You had to know where to turn off if you wanted to get away from the more popular camping spots. I packed light: tent, food, filter, sleeping bag. I had a big Nalgene and a small stove. I brought my old pack and tossed in some extra layers. The forecast said cool and dry, highs in the 50s, lows around 40. Perfect for hiking. I also brought a fire starter and a folding saw in case I wanted to do a proper campfire. I didn't plan on seeing anyone else. I parked at the gravel turnaround where we normally left the trucks and set off on foot. My goal was to find a different spot than usual, somewhere fresh. I crossed a shallow stream and followed a dry wash up a ridge, then kept moving west until the woods thickened and the trail all but disappeared. I spent the first night near a big fallen oak, deep in a thicket. No signs of other campers, no trash or fire pits. It was quiet and still. I made a small fire, boiled some ramen, and sat watching the flames until I got tired. No animals, no wind, just leaves rustling now and then. I zipped up inside my tent and slept without trouble. The next day, I decided to keep exploring. I knew there were old homestead clearings a few miles further in. A few years back, one of the guys found a crumbled chimney out there, half buried in vines. No roads, no trails, just stone in the brush. I figured I'd try to find that again. By early afternoon, I was deeper than I'd ever gone. The terrain dropped off into a long, slow hollow. The air was cooler, damp even though it hadn't rained. The trees got closer together. I stepped over logs and ducked under limbs, scanning for any sign of that old clearing. I was about to stop and get a drink when I smelled something sharp. It hit me before I could place it. Kind of sweet and sour at the same time, like chemicals, a little like acetone, or the time I opened a can of lacquer thinner without gloves. I stood still and sniffed again. It was faint but definitely real. I looked around, then I saw it, maybe 100 feet ahead, tucked into a natural bowl at the base of a ridge. There were barrels, blue plastic drums, stacked and half covered in camo netting, a tarp strung between two trees, a big copper coil propped up on what looked like cinder blocks and bricks. There were buckets, tubes, and blackened metal drums, some kind of still. I froze. Every hair on my body went stiff. I'd heard stories about this kind of thing, never firsthand, always online or through someone's cousin. Deep woods stills, moonshiners, people who don't want visitors, especially not strangers stumbling into their operation. My heart started pounding. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any noise. My boot crunched a twig and I winced, cursing myself. I crouched low, scanned the woods. I didn't see anyone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me. The stories all came rushing back, the ones you hear on outdoor forums. That thing people say about stills. If you find one, you're probably being watched. That's the part that stuck with me. Not the cops, not the danger, just that idea that someone might be 20 feet away, perfectly still, watching you through the trees. Then I saw the fire pit. Off to one side, past the barrels, was a ring of rocks. There was still smoke rising from it. Not much, just a thin wisp, like the heat was almost gone. I couldn't tell if it had just gone out, or if someone had walked away from it minutes ago. There was a thick branch on top, half-charred. I stared at it. Another part of the rumor came back to me, the one that always sounded like BS, like a made-up trick. If you put a log on the fire, it shows you're not a threat, that it makes you technically complicit, like you helped, like you were part of it now. Maybe that's all the person watching needed to see to let you walk away. It sounded stupid, like that old thing where people say if you ask a cop if he's a cop, he has to tell you. Total nonsense, legally speaking. But sometimes the truth doesn't matter. What matters is what someone believes. And I had no way of knowing what kind of person I was dealing with. I stood there for a long minute, fighting the urge to bolt. Then I moved toward the fire pit. I kept one eye on the woods, my hands open. I stepped slow, no noise except my boots in the leaves. The branch in the pit was thick, still glowing on one side. I picked up a nearby piece of wood, half dry, covered in moss. I hesitated. Then I placed it on the fire. Not tossed, not kicked. Just set it down the way you would if it was your own fire. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I hiked northeast, keeping low and quiet, avoiding clearings. I felt like I was being watched the whole time. Once, I heard something behind me. A crack, a snap. But when I stopped, the sound stopped too. I camped that night under an overhang in a small rocky outcrop. I didn't start a fire. I ate trail mix in the dark and kept my headlamp off. Every sound felt louder. I barely slept. The next day I pushed hard. Didn't even stop for water until I was back near the wash I'd started from. The truck was still there, untouched. I climbed in, locked the doors, and drove until I hit pavement. Back home, I spent days thinking about what I'd seen. I searched the area online, found nothing. No news, no arrests, no known operations in that county. Just stories on obscure message boards, usually followed by someone calling it fake. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I did. The part that haunts me the most isn't the still, or the idea of someone out there watching me. It's that I'll never know if putting that log on the fire actually saved me, or if it made me part of something without knowing it. A few weeks after the trip, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. No stamp. Just a plain envelope left in my mailbox, which is weird because it's locked. Inside was a piece of paper. It said 3 words, typed, "You did right." That was it. I haven't gone back to that forest since. Haven't camped alone since either. When people ask, I just say I got busy or lost interest. But the truth is, I'm not sure if I'm still being watched, and I'm not sure what right really meant. But I do know this: if you ever come across a still in the woods, and there's a fire burning, and something in your gut tells you someone's watching, put a log on the fire and walk away. I've always liked going off alone into the woods. Not in a spiritual way, not for escape, not because I hate people or anything like that. I just like the quiet. I work in logistics, long hours, lots of screens, non-stop calls. When I'm in the woods, it all shuts off. The only decisions are about water, weather, and walking. Simple, and it's real. So I do 2 or 3 solo trips a year. Nothing fancy. Just 3 or 4 nights in the Appalachian backcountry, mostly Tennessee, sometimes Georgia or North Carolina. I like places without much cell service and without many people. You can only hear some guy yell into his Bluetooth headset for so many days before your brain starts to itch. Last October, I planned a trip through a corner of Cherokee National Forest, southeast side, near the state line. Not a marked trail, just a loop I mapped out using old Forest Service roads and topographic maps. I had my Garmin for backup. I'd camped in that area a couple years before, but further north. This route cut through hollows and ravines most people probably didn't even know were there unless they worked timber or hunted deep back in the day. I packed light but careful. My tent, food for 4 days, a small stove, water filter, extra socks, med kit. Weather was forecasted to be mild, 40s at night, 60s during the day. I parked at a pull-off next to an old, overgrown service road. There was no sign, just 2 tire ruts disappearing into brush. Exactly how I liked it. The first day was uneventful, mostly uphill, climbing toward a ridge. Not many views, but the forest was quiet and yellow with early fall. I set up camp just below the crest, cooked some freeze-dried chili, and slept like a rock. No sounds, no lights, just wind. The second day was when things started to feel off. I descended down into a narrow valley around mid-morning. I followed a dry stream bed that curved southeast. The canopy thickened as I dropped in, and the light changed. Less sun, more filtered green. At some point, I noticed a smell, sharp, chemical, almost like paint thinner or raw alcohol. I thought maybe it was a rotting tree or even some kind of swamp gas, though I didn't see any standing water. I kept going, slower now. The smell got stronger. Then I saw something through the trees. A flash of blue, not sky, but tarp. I stopped dead. I crouched and scanned. Tarps, a cluster of barrels, metal drums, buckets, hoses, a coil of copper piping. Everything dead silent. No people, no movement, but it was definitely a still. I dropped into a low crouch behind a stump and stayed there. My eyes kept bouncing around, trying to catch movement. There was none, but the site didn't look abandoned. The tarps weren't bleached. The barrels weren't rusted through. A shovel leaned against a tree, and there was a fire pit ringed with rocks. I couldn't see smoke, but the ash looked dark and clumpy. Not old. Something about it all made my stomach turn. The feeling wasn't panic exactly, but something worse. A quiet, creeping dread, like I'd crossed a line without realizing it. I'd read stories on forums, places like Reddit or old message boards, about what happens when you stumble across a still. They're rare now, but not gone. And if you find one, it probably means you're in someone else's territory. Someone who doesn't want to be found. Some of the posts said that if you come across a still and just walk away, you might be okay. But others mentioned something stranger, an idea I never thought much about. That if you find a fire at a still and you put a log on it, that's a kind of signal. A show of goodwill, maybe even compliance. That you're not a threat. That you're part of the silence. I didn't want to be part of anything. I backed away slow, keeping low, careful not to snap twigs. After maybe 50 yards, I stood up and moved fast. Not a full sprint, but steady and deliberate. Eyes always scanning behind me. I didn't hear anyone. I didn't see anyone. But I didn't feel alone. I changed my route entirely. Instead of heading toward the next creek on my planned loop, I climbed northeast, aiming to put a few ridges between me and the still. I didn't know who built it or when they'd be back, but I didn't want to find out. I found a flat spot high on a slope and made camp in a tucked-away pocket behind some boulders. I didn't cook, just ate jerky and granola in the dark. No fire, no light. My headlamp stayed off. I didn't sleep much. Sometime deep into the night, I heard movement. Not animal rustling. Something heavier. A slow step, then pause. Another. I laid in my tent, holding my breath. My knife was in my hand, but it felt ridiculous. A knife against what? Against who? The sound didn't come closer. It moved parallel to my sight, maybe 20 yards out. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. Presence. Like someone making sure I'd kept moving. Like they were checking. By dawn, the sounds were gone. I packed up fast and decided to head back toward the road. I wasn't scared exactly, but I wasn't okay either. My brain kept spinning in circles. Who was out there? Did they see me? Did they hear me? By midday, I made it to the old service road that looped west. It was barely visible, more like 2 worn paths under the grass. I followed it until I found a small pull-off, probably where some truck had parked recently. The ground was muddy and chewed up with tire tracks. Not weeks old, days maybe. There was a fire pit, just stones and a shallow hole. The ashes were cold, but there was a log in the center, blackened at one end. Not tossed in, placed, almost ceremonial. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't touch it. I didn't sit down. I just looked. I wondered if someone had put it there like the old stories said. A log on the fire, a sign, an agreement, a way of saying, I was here, but I won't speak. I left the fire untouched, hiked the rest of the way out with the hairs on my neck standing straight up. When I reached my truck, everything was just as I left it.
No scratches, no slash tires.
But when I looked closer, there were muddy fingerprints on the passenger window. Not smeared, not random, for clean prints. One for each finger, pressed soft but deliberate into the glass. They hadn't been there when I arrived. I didn't wait. I got in, locked the doors, and drove. Didn't stop until I hit a gas station 2 counties away. Bought a coffee, sat in the car, stared out the windshield. I never called the Rangers, never posted about it. I didn't tell my friends. What would I even say? That I saw barrels in the woods? That someone left a log on a fire and fingerprints on my truck? That's not enough. Not for them. But it was enough for me. I still hike, still camp, but I stay closer to marked trails now. I keep my routes boring. I don't chase mystery. And every now and then, deep in the quiet of a solo trip, I catch a smell I don't recognize, or I see a blue tarp off in the trees. I don't go near. I don't stop, because I know what I saw, and I know they saw me. There's no superstition to it, no magic, just rules. And in the woods, some rules are older than the maps. Leave no trace. Don't ask questions. And if you find a fire in the hollow, don't put a log on it. Unless you mean it,